All right, so I hope that by looking at that applet, what you're able to discover was that as you change the radius for a fixed angle, the ratio of the arc length along the circle, whether it was the unit circle or not, if you take the ratio of the arc length to the radius of the circle for a fixed angle, that radius doesn't change as you change the radius of the, that ratio doesn't change as you change the radius of the circle, and that ratio always gives you what we have been calling radians. So if you like this to be nice and clean like that, so for example, if you choose the radius to be 1 in that applet, the arc length is exactly the same as the measure of the angle. So that seems nice and clean from a pre-calculus standpoint. To my mind, though, there's a much more convincing argument coming later in calculus. So if that didn't really seem convincing to you about why we use radians, don't feel alone. It doesn't convince me that strongly either, but we'll see a much better reason coming up when we do some calculus. So we're going to define a function to be sinusoidal. Sinusoidal means like a sine function. If we can write it in one of these two ways, a sine bt plus d plus c. Notice that I've changed to t for the variable from theta. T we're going to start thinking about in terms of time shortly, or cosine. And last week we learned about what the a, the b, the d, and the c all do. So this will be a good chance to review that. We are not going to make you ever use this d in this class. The d, as you probably remember from last week, does a horizontal shift. We will always, any example that we give you will not require you to use d. You're welcome to do a horizontal shift if you like, and we'll check your answers to see if they're right, but you'll never need to do one that requires a horizontal shift. So now we have an applet for you so that you can look at these graphs and change the values of a, b, and c to see how they affect the shape of the graph. And what we're going to do after this applet is to define 3 words. The amplitude of the graph, which is some measure of how much up and down it goes. The period of the graph, which is some measure of how long it takes to repeat itself. And the midline of the graph, which is some measure of how high up or down the graph is relative to the horizontal t-axis. So keeping those 3 words in mind, amplitude, period, and midline, please go ahead and experiment with this applet and see which letter A, B, and C creates each of those 3 different features.